living in a quiet suburban neighborhood had always felt like a safe haven for me. The rows of neatly manicured lawns, friendly neighbors waving as they walked their dogs, and the familiar sight of kids riding their bikes down the streets created an idyllic atmosphere. But all that changed when the new neighbor moved in next door. I first noticed something was off about him when I caught him staring at my house from across the yard. His eyes were unnaturally intense, and his gaze lingered far longer than was comfortable. It sent a shiver down my spine, but I brushed it off as a passing oddity. However, as the days went by, my unease only grew. Every morning, I would see him standing at his window, staring blankly at my house. It was as if he had nothing else to do. Sometimes, when I left for work, I'd catch him watching me, his piercing eyes following my every move. At night, his house remained shrouded in darkness, except for the faint glow of a single dim light. Curiosity soon gave way to fear, and I decided to confide in a few of the neighbors about my concerns. To my surprise, they all had similar stories to share. They had seen him watching them too, standing at his window or lurking near his fence. None of us knew much about him. He kept to himself, rarely seen outside during the day. One evening, as I returned home from work, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There he was, in my backyard, standing among the trees, a figure shrouded in darkness. His eyes seemed to reflect the faint moonlight, and I could feel them on me even from a distance. I hesitated, my heart pounding, unsure of what to do. I called out to him, my voice quivering, asking what he was doing there. He didn't respond, just continued to stare. It was in that moment that I realized how vulnerable I was. My other neighbors were away for the weekend, and I was alone, face to face with this eerie stranger who seemed to have an unsettling fixation on me. I retreated into my house, locking the doors and drawing the curtains. My mind raced, and I felt a growing sense of dread. Who was this man, and why was he so fixated on me? What did he want? I barely slept that night, the image of his dark figure lurking in my backyard haunting my thoughts. The next morning, I decided to take action. I contacted the police, explaining my situation and expressing my concerns for my safety. They assured me they would look into it, and that brought a glimmer of relief. But as the day wore on, my anxiety grew. I couldn't shake the feeling that his eyes were still on me, even from within my own home. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, every creak and rustle outside amplifying my fear. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, that I was just being paranoid. But then I heard it, a soft, barely audible whisper, carried by the wind. My name, spoken in a voice that sent a chill down my spine. I turned on the bedside lamp, heart pounding, scanning the room for any signs of intrusion. But there was nothing, just the empty darkness of my room, and the weight of an impending threat. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. He was inside my house. As terror gripped me, I reached for my phone and dialed 911. My voice trembled as I whispered to the operator that there was an intruder in my home. They assured me help was on the way, but the minutes felt like hours as I listened for any signs of movement. Then, a sudden crash echoed from downstairs, followed by a sinister laugh that sent a wave of cold dread through me. He was coming closer, his intentions unknown and his presence a chilling nightmare. I held my breath, clutching the phone tightly, praying for the sound of sirens in the distance. But as the seconds ticked by, the realization hit me. I was on my own. And with that thought, I knew that whatever happened next would be a battle between my fear and the survival instinct that was coursing through my veins. With my heart racing and adrenaline pumping through my veins, I knew I had to make a decision, stay hidden and hope the police arrived in time, or confront the intruder myself. The sinister laugh echoed in my ears, a constant reminder of the threat lurking just downstairs. I clutched a heavy book from my nightstand, my fingers trembling around its edges. Slowly, I crept out of bed, my every movement amplified by the silence of the house. I strained to hear any signs of the intruder's approach, my ears attuned to even the slightest sound. Step by step, I descended the stairs, my breath held in my chest. The dim moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I felt like a character in a horror movie, walking into the unknown with a heart full of trepidation. As I reached the bottom of the staircase, I heard it again, the soft shuffle of footsteps in the living room. My grip tightened on the book, my knuckles turning white. I rounded the corner and came face to face with him. There he stood, the odd neighbor, his eyes fixed on me with an unsettling mixture of amusement and malice. His lips curled into a twisted smile, sending chills down my spine. The room seemed to shrink around us, the tension palpable in the air. Without a word, I raised the book in my trembling hand, my heart pounding in my chest. I demanded to know who he was, why he had been watching me, and why he had invaded my home. His laughter, cold and mocking, cut through the air like a blade. He took a step closer, his eyes locking onto mine. The room felt suffocating, as if his presence was draining the air itself. His voice, a mere whisper, slithered into my ears, recounting tales of isolation, obsession, and darkness that sent shivers down my spine. In a moment of desperation, I swung the book at him, but he moved with an unnatural swiftness, avoiding my blow effortlessly. His laughter echoed around me, taunting me, as he spoke of a connection, an understanding that only he and I shared. I backed away, my heart racing, as he continued his unnerving monologue. Every step I took seemed to lead me deeper into a nightmare, one from which there was no escape. His voice seemed to echo in my mind, his words twisting my thoughts. Then, as if responding to my own thoughts, I felt a sudden change in the atmosphere. His smile faded, and his eyes lost their intensity. He extended his hand, palm open, in a gesture of surrender and apology. He spoke softly, his voice carrying a hint of sincerity. He explained that he had been lost, isolated in his own world of obsession and loneliness. He had watched from the shadows, drawn to the lives of those around him, yearning for a connection that had eluded him for so long. He admitted that his actions had been wrong, that he had crossed boundaries he shouldn't have. As I listened, the fear began to ebb, replaced by a mix of pity and understanding. It was clear that the odd neighbor was not just a sinister figure but a broken soul seeking solace in the most disturbing of ways. He wasn't the monster I had imagined, but a man driven to the brink by his own demons. The sound of approaching sirens broke the spell, and he turned his head, his expression a mix of resignation and relief. The police had arrived, responding to my call for help. With a final look, he slipped away into the shadows, leaving me alone in the aftermath of the night's events. The officers arrived just in time to find me shaken but unharmed. I recounted the chilling encounter, and they assured me that they would handle the situation. As the sun rose, casting its golden light over the neighborhood, I felt a sense of closure, a mixture of relief and sorrow for the strange man who had intruded into my life. In the days that followed, the odd neighbor's house remained empty, a haunting reminder of the bizarre events that had unfolded. I learned that he had been taken into custody, receiving the help he so desperately needed. The sense of unease that had pervaded my neighborhood slowly began to dissipate, replaced by a renewed sense of community and vigilance. Though the memories of that night would never truly fade, they served as a reminder that sometimes, the monsters we fear are not the ones lurking in the shadows, but the ones born of our own vulnerabilities and isolation. And as time passed, I found solace in the strength I had discovered within myself, a strength forged in the crucible of fear and uncertainty. The summer breeze ruffled the leaves as I stood in front of my newly acquired summer house, a quaint cottage nestled in a serene neighborhood. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden hue over the surroundings. It seemed like the perfect getaway, a place to escape the hustle and bustle of the city and enjoy the tranquility of nature. As I unpacked my belongings, a friendly neighbor from across the street approached, introducing herself as Mrs. Lawson. With a warm smile, she welcomed me to the neighborhood and offered to help me settle in. Her kind demeanor put me at ease, and I felt a sense of comfort knowing that friendly faces were nearby. The first few weeks in the summer house were idyllic. I spent my days exploring the nearby forest trails, lounging by the lake, and enjoying leisurely evenings grilling on the patio. Everything felt serene, and the only sounds that accompanied the nights were the chirping of crickets and the distant rumble of thunder during occasional storms. However, as the weeks passed, subtle peculiarities began to emerge. On some nights, I thought I heard faint footsteps outside my bedroom window, as if someone was tiptoeing around the cottage. But whenever I ventured outside to investigate, I found no trace of anyone nearby. I dismissed it as my imagination playing tricks on me, the product of being in an unfamiliar environment. One stormy night, as lightning streaked across the sky and thunder rumbled in the distance, I decided to seek solace in the basement. The sound of rain pelting against the windows created a soothing rhythm, and I found myself lost in thought. That's when I noticed it, a strange, soft creaking noise, as if a door was being opened and closed ever so slightly. My heart raced as I climbed the basement stairs, my flashlight casting eerie shadows on the walls. I checked every room, but everything appeared normal. Just as I was about to write it off as my imagination, I heard a faint whisper, barely audible over the sound of the rain. My name, uttered in a hushed tone, sent shivers down my spine. I turned around, searching for the source of the voice, but the basement was empty. Unease settled in the pit of my stomach, and I hurried back to the safety of the living room, the storm outside providing a fitting backdrop to the unsettling experience. Sleep eluded me that night as my mind replayed the events over and over. The next morning, I decided to confide in Mrs. Lawson about the strange occurrences. She listened attentively, her expression growing serious as I recounted my experiences. With a gentle yet concerned demeanor, she assured me that the neighborhood was peaceful and that my concerns were likely the result of an active imagination. As weeks turned into months, I tried to put the unsettling incidents behind me. I immersed myself in the beauty of nature, hoping that the sense of unease would fade with time. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The turning point came one balmy evening when I decided to host a barbecue for a few friends from the city. The scent of grilled meat wafted through the air, mingling with laughter and the clinking of glasses. The atmosphere was jovial, and I felt a sense of relief, finally beginning to believe that my worries were unfounded. As the night wore on, the sound of footsteps caught my attention once more. I exchanged a knowing glance with my friends, half expecting them to comment on the odd noise. But their expressions were filled with confusion, and they assured me that they hadn't heard anything unusual. Determined to prove that I wasn't imagining things, I excused myself and stepped outside onto the patio, my friends' curious gazes following me. The air was still, and the only sound was the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. Yet, just as I was about to turn back, I heard it again, the unmistakable sound of footsteps, approaching from behind me. I spun around, my flashlight illuminating the yard, but there was no one in sight. Panic surged within me, and I called out to my friends, urging them to join me. Together, we scoured the area, but the footsteps seemed to be elusive, as if taunting me from the shadows. That's when I noticed a figure standing at the edge of the forest, partially obscured by the darkness. My heart raced as I directed the flashlight toward the silhouette, revealing a woman with disheveled hair and vacant eyes. She stood motionless, her gaze fixed on me, as if studying me from a distance. The sight was unnerving, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I tried to maintain my composure, asking the woman if she was okay and if she needed help. But she remained silent, her presence casting an eerie shadow over the gathering. As I watched, the woman turned and disappeared into the forest, her footsteps fading into the distance. My friends exchanged worried glances, and I could sense their unease. It was clear that the strange occurrences had escalated beyond my control. After the barbecue, I found myself consumed by a sense of urgency. I reached out to Mrs. Lawson once more, sharing the unsettling encounter with the mysterious woman. This time, her expression turned grim, and she revealed a disturbing truth. The woman matched the description of someone who had lived in the neighborhood years ago, someone who had vanished under mysterious circumstances. As Mrs. Lawson shared the woman's tragic tale, I realized that the disturbances I had experienced were linked to a dark history that the neighborhood had tried to forget. The woman's restless spirit seemed to wander the area, leaving behind an unsettling presence that could not be ignored. Determined to bring closure to both the woman and myself, I embarked on a journey to uncover the truth. The more I delved into the past, the more I uncovered a web of secrets and unanswered questions. It became clear that the woman's presence was a manifestation of the unresolved pain and tragedy that had haunted the neighborhood for years. As I connected the dots and unraveled the mysteries, I found myself confronting the woman's spirit once more, this time, not with fear, but with empathy and compassion. In a moment of profound connection, I felt a wave of emotions, as if her gratitude and longing had washed over me. With the truth revealed, the strange occurrences gradually subsided, and the summer house regained its sense of peace. The woman's spirit seemed to find solace, her presence fading as the neighborhood embraced its painful history and began to heal. In the end, my summer house became a place of closure and transformation, where the echoes of the past were finally put to rest. And as I looked out at the serene surroundings, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the journey that had led me to confront the mysteries lurking just beyond the surface.